Hello and welcome to the channel. Today I've got part one of a two-part series for you on bots and a presentation that I call Here Come the Bots, which I recently presented at the Microsoft 365 Day in Saskatchewan. And so this was an online conference that took place in early October here, October 3rd. And I've split this presentation because it is an hour into two segments. So this is part one. And then look for part two shortly on the channel. Thanks and enjoy. Before we dive deeper into the content, I wanted to let you know about an emerging community found at serverlessnotes.com. This is a community resource that covers best practices, tips, and latest announcements built on contributions by technology enthusiasts from around the globe. On serverlessnotes.com, you'll find content related to Power Automate, Azure Logic Apps, Azure Service Bus, Azure Functions, and much, much more. Serverlessnotes.com is brought to you by Serverless 360, a portal that is focused on operations and support for Microsoft Azure serverless resources. Now, this is a complementary tool to the Azure portal, and it helps organizations in supporting Azure serverless applications. You can find out more about Serverless 360 at serverless360.com. Okay, so good morning, everyone. I think we can probably get started here. My name's Kent Weare. I'm a Principal Program Manager lead at Microsoft. I'm part of the PowerCat team. And so the CAT stands for Customer Advisory Team, and we typically work with strategic customers on adopting emerging technology, including what we're going to see here today. So we're going to talk about conversational chatbots using Power Virtual Agents, and then also robotic process automation, RPA. So I'm happy to participate in this event. I'm actually from Saskatchewan. I grew up in Regina. I went to U of R, and certainly when the call for speaker sessions came out, I was looking forward to this being in person, but obviously there's other circumstances going on right now, so be it. Happy to be here remotely. I am dialing in here from Calgary, Alberta. So here's a bit of an agenda that we're going to go through today. We're going to talk about Power Virtual Agents, and we're going to do so in the context of Microsoft Teams. Obviously, with this being an M365 event, wanted to really emphasize some of the new capabilities that are available as part of the recent Project Oakdale release. So we're going to focus on Oakdale and virtual agents as part of the first part of this presentation. Then on the second part, we're also going to talk about something brand new. And this is where it comes to RPA. So at Ignite, just I guess what was that, last week, we announced the introduction of Power Automate Desktop. And so we're going to talk all about Power Automate Desktop and run you through a demo from there. I do have some good call to action, so do hang out for that, just in terms of some material in order to take what you've learned today and actually apply it to some of your use cases as well. As we do go through this content, feel free to add questions into the chat. I know that we've got Mohammed who's standing by and moderating this. Certainly when we transition from Power Virtual Agents to Power Automate Desktop, we'll certainly try to take some questions at that point and then naturally cover the RPA questions at the end. So feel free to go ahead and add to the chat, and certainly want to thank you all for spending your time with me here today. Okay, now just to level set here, transformation is no longer an option. And actually this is a marketing slide, I didn't create it, but it's so true. Like, we get to deal with a lot of different customers, a lot of different size of customers, and this statement, couldn't be truer. And naturally what we see is that organizations, large and small, are all challenged with adopting technology and keeping up on that proverbial treadmill. And it's super important that folks do this because it's just crazy sometimes when you do run into some of these customers and they're just so far behind, and it's not getting any easier to catch up. If anything, it's getting harder. And the other thing I would say is for organizations that may be smaller in nature, this is really your time to shine. It is much easier to roll out transformation programs in smaller organizations than larger organizations. And so this really becomes an equalizer as people become more competitive in the marketplace, and certainly taking advantage of low-code, no-code tools helps accelerate that journey. Now, I'm sure you'll hear all about these tools today. You'll probably see a slide that looks like this probably in every session. But for those of you that may not be familiar with the Power Platform, let's just take a quick tour. We'll start here in the bottom left-hand corner. This is Power Apps. The ability to create low-code, no-code, cross-platform, mobile and web applications without having the need to write a lot of code. Then on the upper left-hand corner, we've got Power Virtual Agents. This is our conversational chatbot experience, and this is going to be a core focus of what we talk about today. On the upper right-hand corner, we've got Power Automate, and really this is our automation platform. You might have heard of Microsoft Flow in the past. This is essentially the evolution of Microsoft Flow rebranded as we continue to add more and more capabilities into this specific service. And more specifically, we're talking about RPA, robotic process automation, as being that latest capability added to Power Automate. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, we've got Power BI, which is naturally the ability to create dynamic dashboards and reports, and the ability to connect all of these together. Certainly Microsoft Teams in the middle here. And like I said, that's going to be a big focus of the first part of this content as we go through today's session. Now, when it comes to Power Virtual Agents, what makes this different than other chatbot solutions is this ability to have subject matter experts to be able to go ahead and build bots. And they can do so by using a workflow type experience that you can see here on the screen itself, right? Like if you can go ahead and build Word documents or build PowerPoints, you can build a chatbot. Now, I don't want to undersell though the opportunity to extend your chatbot, right? Sometimes we go a little overboard on the whole citizen developer side of things here. And I do want to make sure that people understand that there's a spectrum here. And there's the ability to create like content-based, frequently asked questions, types of bot, and then you can build transactional bots. And that's where you can go ahead and take advantage of our extensibility story, which we're going to talk about here in a few moments. Now, in terms of Power Virtual Agents, this is a relatively new service. It GA'd, I think it was last December. And so it's been out for like around 9-10 months. And so where did it come from? So it's something that really is built on top of a lot of other Microsoft assets. So if we start at the bottom of the pyramid, this all is built upon Azure Cognitive Services. And so certainly when we talk about chatbots, one of the core goals of a chatbot is to be able to provide self-service capabilities and deflection. So you're going to see as we get into the example, we can talk to a chatbot and it's going to understand what we're trying to achieve and then try to solve that. Well, how is it doing that? It's doing that by using natural language understanding, which is a core technology that's part of the Azure Cognitive Services stack and really has its roots inside of Microsoft research. So there's a long heritage around this. This isn't just something that happened overnight. If we take a step up, that's where we have the bot framework. And the bot framework is a very comprehensive service for building bots. But what's different about it is that you do need to write code. And so naturally, when you need to write code, you are going to reduce the audience that can go ahead and build bots. And so I come from a developer background. I took computer science at U of R. So it's one of those things where, I'm not trying to de-emphasize bot framework, but I think what the opportunity here is by democratizing who can build bots, you can actually build more bots. And we're going to see that in action today inside of Microsoft Teams, where we don't need to write any code to build a rich, immersive experience that would have required a lot of development effort a few years ago. And if we think about companies transforming, it's all about getting your new services or your capabilities to market as fast as possible and taking advantage of opportunities. And really that's what allows us to go ahead and do. If we take one more step up, that's where we're dealing with the Power Platform, and you're going to see this in action today. There's a lot of native integration between the Power Platform and Power Virtual Agents. For example, you can host a chatbot on top of a Power App. You can host a chatbot inside of a Power Apps portal. We're going to see Power Automate being used a lot with chatbots in the ability to take advantage of all of these different connectors that exist here on the upper right-hand corner, where we can now extend our chatbot by tapping into other systems. Today we're going to talk about Planner, we're going to talk about OneNote, we're going to talk about SharePoint, and those are just some of the examples that we can go ahead and extend our chatbot by leveraging the Power Platform. And this is what makes us unique relative to our competitors, is this ability to integrate so well with the Microsoft ecosystem, but also the non-Microsoft ecosystem. We've got connectors in here for Salesforce and ServiceNow, and so those are other opportunities that you can plug into those ecosystems using that connector. Now, very quickly here, I just wanted to walk through the life cycle of building a bot if you've never gone through this process before. So naturally, we have a maker portal, and in today's context, we're going to be inside of Teams, and this maker experience is essentially embedded inside of Teams. Now, I do want to highlight that there is its own maker portal. It's essentially rehosted here in Teams, but you can do what I'm going to talk about today outside of Teams as well. But I think there's a lot of opportunities if you do leverage it inside of Teams, especially when you're building your internal use cases. So you're going to use the Maker Studio. You're going to be able to go ahead and author and test your bot. And one way you can get started is by using a feature called starter topics or suggested topics, where you can go ahead and point the bot at some publicly accessible, frequently asked questions, and it'll go ahead and ingest all of that content and then build out essentially all of those conversation workflows that basically result in question and answer. And it's an accelerated experience where you can go ahead and build out your bot very quickly. Now, you naturally have the ability to create conversations on your own, and that's where we give you this workflow like canvas here, where you can go ahead and build out your conversation, provide prompts, ask questions, get answers, have conditional routing, and then naturally reach out to other systems through our extensibility story. And that extensibility story comes through Power Automate and the ability to create a flow and then be able to call that flow, pass inputs into the flow, do some processing, get the outputs, send it back to the chatbot. And so this unlocks a lot of use cases for us. Another extensibility story, and this isn't so much applicable in the context of Teams, but where people have made investments in the bot framework, we will allow you to reuse those investments so that you can go ahead and plug those bot framework skills into your chatbot and to be able to go ahead and reuse them. Now, where we see this, and this is a better together story for us. Naturally, when you're building out chatbots that have like some sort of business use case, especially customer service, you're going to have people in the customer service department that are going to understand what are the problems that are top of mind. What is the language that customers use when they interact with customer service? Those are the best people to go ahead and build out your content for your bot. But you might need to tap into a CRM or a legacy system. And that's where you might need a developer to go in and build flows or to build bot framework skills and then really be able to plug those two experiences together. So you'll probably hear this term more and more from Microsoft, but it's this notion of fusion dev teams where it's really taking advantage of the knowledge and subject matter expertise that exists in the business and then aligning it with IT shops or IT departments where they have deeper technical skills and really coming up with a better product. Naturally, once you've gone ahead and built and tested your bot, you have the ability to publish it. Now, in the context of today, we're only going to be publishing to Teams, but certainly if you are in the experience outside of Teams, you can publish to other places such as custom websites, custom mobile applications, Facebook, and some other social channels. Now, with bots, it's one of those things where you never get it right the first time. There is an element of testing and learning, and as a result, we provide you some analytics. So you can see what are your conversations or topics that are performing well, what are some of your conversations that are performing poorly, where people may abandon, and you want to be able to make some tweaks or modifications in order to keep those folks more engaged. And really, these analytics are out of the box, allow you to go ahead and to do so. So that was a little bit of a primer for Power Virtual Agents in case you folks are new to it. Now let's talk a little bit more about Teams, and we'll get into demos here shortly. I don't need to talk to you or sell you on the idea of Teams. I feel like if you're at an M365 event, you're already bought in, but naturally it's a huge surface. And when we talk about a surface that big, how can we best service that audience, those people that are inside of Teams day in and day out? I'm sure, especially in this COVID, world of COVID, you probably spend most of your days in Teams. I certainly do. And so it's one of those things where you're in that platform, you don't necessarily want to always be leaving it. And so that's the opportunity here is we're bringing all of the goodness of the Power Platform, whether that's apps, flows, chatbots, and dashboards, and be able to bring them right into Teams so that you don't have to leave. And it really becomes your remote worker platform. Now, I'm sure this will be talked about a lot today, but Project Oakdale is really this code word. I know it's had a few different names or versions. We won't get into that. But what this essentially does is it brings parts of the Power Platform into teams. So naturally, if you're building an app, you need to store your data somewhere. And sometimes you might want to store that in SharePoint, and that's fine. But sometimes you might want to store it inside of like a CDS, a data store like CDS, the Common Data Service. And so what's happened is we've brought some of these experiences in to teams, slimmed them down in some circumstances like CDS, but then giving you a lot of that robust capabilities that exist in the Power Platform if you were to access it outside of Teams itself. And so here's just an example of a table that exists inside of Teams, and then naturally you can build on top of this. You can build flows on top of this, or you can build apps on top of this or dashboards and really take advantage of it. Now, another important thing to know about Teams, right, is this isn't the Wild Wild West. There is governance in place here, and so that IT admins do have control around what's happening inside of Teams. I think there's always that risk that you have this huge proliferation and you create a big mess really quick, and so certainly there's some governance capabilities to support that as well. And now when we come to Project Oakdale and Teams in general, is we're not isolating or preventing broad audiences from contributing here, right? Whether you're a citizen developer, whether you're an IT admin or a developer in IT or pro developers, you all have a place here, right? There's new capabilities for Bot Framework if you want to plug it in. Obviously, we're going to talk about more of a low-code, no-code, but regardless of your persona, you can go ahead and take advantage of it. I prefer the term, democratization or democratized access to these tools as opposed to citizen versus pro. But just note, regardless of your persona, there's a place for you inside of this platform itself. Now, when it comes to like installing these solutions, there essentially is, kind of like a store where you can go ahead, build out your, say, chatbot in this case. Go ahead, submit it for review by an administrator. An administrator can approve it, and then it becomes discoverable for other users in your organization to go ahead and take advantage of. And that speaks a little bit to that governance story that I just mentioned myself. Now, just in the interest of time, I'll probably move through this slide pretty quick, but the whole idea here, simple to build something quickly, simple to seamless to deploy. We're not talking about solution packages and ALM and CI/CD, and if those are things that you want, then you're probably best off using these techniques or these tools outside of Teams. But we want something quick and simple, and certainly the abstractions that have been put in place really allow you to do it while still taking advantage of the underlying power of the platform itself. And then naturally easy to manage, right? We want to give those tools to admins so that they've got some control over this. And then also licensing, like we're not going to talk about licensing today, but when you have your entitlement through Teams, now you get access to a lot of these tools itself. And naturally, there could be some limitations in terms of what you can do with them. But for example, Power Virtual Agents was something that you always had to pay for separately. Now you can build chatbots for no additional charges. There are going to be some differences between those plans, but all in all, everyone can go build a chatbot now and not have to worry about going and getting a consumption-based license for their tenant. Now, when we talk about Power Virtual Agents, what you do need to do is, and it is a little bit subtle, but when you click on apps in the bottom left-hand corner, you're going to find Power Virtual Agents. You go ahead and install that app. When that app is installed, essentially now what you have is your canvas. And that's what we see here, where you can go ahead and author your chatbot inside of Teams, inside of this canvas. You then have the ability to go ahead and publish it, request approval, and then it becomes available for others to discover as well. And so we can do all of this without needing to even leave Teams, and a very integrated and seamless experience. And you do get a very similar experience, or in this case, they're calling a fully embedded bot experience as a result of it. So there's not a whole lot of trade-offs. If you've used Power Virtual Agents before in its Maker portal, this will be exactly the same and very familiar to you in order to go ahead and to use this. Now, one other thing that's awesome about this, especially if you've used Power Virtual Agents on its own previously, in order to have single sign-on, there were some steps that you had to go ahead and perform. You had to go ahead and go into Azure AD, create an app registration, take all these ugly client IDs and secrets and tokens and all of this crazy stuff, and basically embed it into our canvas to enable that single sign-on. Well, you don't have to worry about that now. You're already in the context of Teams. And what the benefit of this is that when you have someone that's talking to your chatbot, you know who they are. And we're going to see this today, where we can actually go ahead and grab their user ID, or we can grab their display name in order to have more meaningful, context-aware scenarios for them. And so this is just a high-level architecture view of what this really looks like. Obviously, we've got the Teams platform that sits on top. We've got all of these capabilities in the Power Platform that we've talked about. We've got CDS, Project Oakdale Tables, which is really built on top of the Common Data Service. So you can kind of think of it as a slimmed-down version of CDS, but giving you that enterprise robustness that you would expect in terms of being able to store and manage your data. Okay, enough of the slideware when it comes to Power Virtual Agents. Let's get right into the demo itself. Okay, so I've got Teams. I'm logged into a different tenant, so I'm just using the web browser for now, but the experience is essentially exactly the same. So here I have just my regular team. It's called Project Phoenix. And what I'm going to talk to you today about is really about how you can improve the productivity of a specific project by introducing a chatbot. I'm sure you've all been involved in projects. It's always a pain to find information. And the idea of this particular demo is to help people discover that information, but to be able to use a chatbot. And naturally, this can be extended far greater than what I'm showing you here today, but I'm hoping this gives you some ideas that you can actually go ahead and build upon. Now, I talked about apps, right? When you click on apps, you'll be able to find Power Virtual Agents. You can go ahead and click on it here. I've already installed it. And so what it does do is it shows up over here. And when I click on this, now I get the Power Virtual Agents experience. There's some starter information that you can use to go ahead and get started and familiar with our offering. I've already gone ahead and built a chatbot. So if I click on the Chatbots tab, I'll go ahead and I will be able to see it here. I've got my Project Phoenix bot here. I'm just going to go ahead and click on it. And this will be a very familiar experience if you've used Power Virtual Agents before. I have the ability to go ahead and find my topics. I have my test harness right here. And in this case, we're going to go ahead and explore our topics itself. Now, what I would suggest if you've never used Power Virtual Agents before, when you do create a bot, you're going to get some sample lessons. Go ahead and take a look at these. Great way to get started in terms of building out a sample use case. This deals with a retail store and what are your hours, what are your locations, things of that nature. So do go ahead, check those out. And the other thing I want to call out here is that we do have user topics and system topics. User topics are user-created content, including the samples that Microsoft provides for you out of the box. We also have system topics. These are provided by Microsoft, and they address common scenarios so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So for example, if someone walks up to your bot and says, "Hi," we're going to go ahead and kick off this system topic for greeting, right? We can go ahead and change these messages itself, but these are just value add type capabilities itself. If we want to go ahead and I've built out a few different use cases here. And so let's go ahead and start off with probably, a very common request, and that's get the org chart. So you're in a project, and it obviously depends on the size of your project, but it's always interesting to know who's who in the zoo, right? Who are the developers, who are the testers, who are the project managers, especially if you're new to a project. And so what I've done here is I've created a topic, and this is a very simple topic, and I've just called it get org chart. I've got trigger phrases here. These are phrases that are used to essentially wake up your bot and wake up your conversation. Now, this is where the natural language understanding gets introduced. These are essentially the statements that get made, and we try to understand what the intent of the user is and then route it accordingly. So when we talk about statements, they don't necessarily have to be like for like or exactly the same, but they should have the same meaning. And when they have the same meaning, we'll go ahead and we'll kick off this specific authoring canvas. Now in this case, very simple, right? Here's our trigger phrases, and then I've got basically a link to our org chart, and I can also, acknowledge the user, by saying, here's the org chart, so and so, and then I'm going to end the conversation. And whenever we end the conversation, we do give the ability to, when you use this specific action, to provide a survey. And this survey helps you with your bot and all of your metrics that do show up here in the analytics tab. Now, we won't have time to go through this today, but this is pretty important in terms of getting that feedback so you can go ahead and iterate on top of it. Now, on the left-hand side here, we do have our test harness. So I'm just going to go ahead and just type in show me org chart. And then what's going to happen is we'll be able to basically fire off this bot. And then here we have a link to this specific org chart. Now, in this case, the org chart just happens to be a Word document that is actually stored inside of my team. But it's just one of those things where when it's, you forget where it is or you're not sure where it is, it's easy to basically be able to go ahead, create a very simple topic, include a link to a document, and there you go. Now you can go ahead and see the org chart itself. So something quite simple, but quite useful when you're trying to go ahead and find that type of information. Now let's go back to our topics and we'll explore, say, the next level of complexity. Let's go and say, we want to see what is the project roster. You want to be able to say, okay, who is, what are the skill sets, what are the time zones that people are in, and what is their role. So kind of similar to the org chart, but what's different about this is we're going to go ahead and use the extensibility features here. Now, with this specific data set, what I'm using is a list. One of the new features of M365, we're going to use a list. And here I've just got the title, the person, their time zone, and their specialty. So if you wanted to book a meeting and you're like, what time zone is Lynn in? Well, here we can be able to go ahead and to capture that. And so here it's going to be similar in some ways, but different in others, where we can go ahead, we have our trigger phrases, we can provide a message, including the display name. And then here what's going to happen is we're going to call out to a flow. And the flow is accessible by clicking on call an action. And when we go ahead and click on this button, we're going to see all of the flows that are part of our chatbot. And then we have the ability to invoke them, or we can go ahead and create new. Now in this case, we'll go ahead and just take a quick look at our chatbot, at the flow that supports this chatbot. And here we can go ahead and see what's going on here. So now all I'm doing is I'm going to go ahead and initialize a variable. I have no inputs. I can pass inputs. We'll see that in an upcoming demo. I'm going to then just go ahead and make a call into this specific list inside of SharePoint. I'm then going to essentially loop through all of the result sets, and I'm going to use Markdown in order to provide some formatting where I'll basically go ahead and concatenate a string. And then what I'll do is I'll return that string back to the chatbot itself. And so when I go ahead and run this, that will have all of this information available to us at our fingertips. And so this is just an example, once again, right? So here we've got some formatting using that Markdown, bold, italics. We can include links, their time zone, and their specialty. So just an example, once again, I'm sure there's a variety of other sources that you're actually capturing in, say, a SharePoint list that you can actually return through a bot itself. Now let's go to the next level, and as I'm going through this, I'm increasing sort of the complexity involved in some of this. In this case, we might want to be able to go ahead and log a task. So you might be in a meeting, you might be having a conversation, and you want to be able to go ahead and record a planner task for the team itself. And so in this case, we're going to, just have a little welcome message here, and then we're going to prompt the user for some more information, like what's the name of the task, when is it due, and then who would you want to assign this task to. Here we're going to use inputs into a flow, and then once we go ahead and call the flow, we can then provide the response back to the person that's calling this. Now let's go ahead, let's click on the flow just to see what what's here. And I am moving a little bit quickly on purpose just because we do have a lot of content to go through, so I do apologize for that. But what we're doing here is we've got these inputs, and then what we can do is use these inputs as dynamic content when we go ahead and call downstream actions. So here, when we create a task, we've got the task name, the due date, and who it's assigned to. And then what we can just do is provide an acknowledgement back, just indicating that the task has been created successfully. So let's just go ahead, let's just run this. And so we can go ahead and say log task. And we'll say, what is the name of the task? And then we'll say it's run deployment. This task is due on Monday. And then in this case, no, it doesn't have to be the full email address. We could do some things because we do know who's being called in. It could also be the could also be just their username, but obviously we need to feed something into the flow itself. And it looks like Lydia H, I think I've probably messed up the email address here. Yes, I have. Let's try that again. Naturally, you can include some additional error handling as well, because you don't necessarily want to have this bad message here. Okay, deployment. That should be better. And now we can see that our deployment task has been created. This is just the ugly ID for that task. And if we go over to our project site, check out project tasks. Here we have deployment, which I had just created. And then naturally we can go ahead and manage those tasks. We could also expose through the bot, essentially when someone wants to complete their task as well. So that's another management capability as well. Now the last one we're going to talk about, and then we're going to shift over to RPA, is, you might be creating meeting minutes where, at the beginning of a meeting, you basically start a conversation with a bot. And in this case, we're going to use an adaptive card to be able to capture some of these meeting minutes. Now in this case, what we do want to do is just capture the user ID, because we're going to want to be able to log who is creating that specific meeting note. So if we go ahead and click into the flow itself, what we're going to do here is we are going to capture the user ID, and then we're going to acknowledge back to the user, just saying the meeting flow has started, look for an adaptive card chat request. Here what we're going to do is we're going to provide an adaptive card which will allow us to collect more details. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and basically create a page in a section inside of OneNote that includes the meeting title, the meeting attendees, and then also the actual details itself. Now there's this funky thing with \n, which represents a new line inside of text. And so I'm just replacing that just so to have it a little bit cleaner inside of OneNote. Then what we're going to do is once the page has been created in the OneNote, we're going to post a message to the channel just saying, hey, for this specific meeting, we've captured the notes and the notes are available here. Now, I've been showing you so far, I've always been showing you how to call this chatbot from inside of the test harness. Now, I've gone ahead and published this bot, and now I can go ahead and talk to this bot because it's published and I have access to it. And then I can just now say meeting minutes. That should kick off our conversation. Now I have an adaptive card that's been sent to me. And then here I can go ahead and fill out that adaptive card. So in this case, we'll call this our M365 presentation, attendees, and I'm just going to make this up, Steve, Tom, and we had a great chat, more info to come. I'll now go ahead and click submit, and then what's happening is that same flow is still active, And what it's going to go ahead and do is it's going to go ahead and create that specific meeting note inside of our notebook. And then what it'll do is also post into our channel that it has actually happened. Now, the one thing that's a bit of a problem here is that there is no way to go ahead and update or to create when you have this page to programmatically create that name. So it is something that you would have to manually come do, but you would have all of the information that you captured as part of that adaptive card. Also, when you go into your posts, we can see here that the notes were created and we include the web link to that specific content itself. And so that's just how we would go ahead and access that. Okay, so very quickly, we've got a few questions here. How did you declare those variables used in PVA? And so what we'll just quickly show you here is essentially whenever you ask a question, you will always have a variable that is created for you. You can then go ahead and rename those variables so that it's more relevant to you, because I think we just call it var by default, something of that nature. And so let's just find one of these, log task. And here, so for example, I created a question, and when I created the question, it automatically will basically come up with a variable. And then here I go ahead, I can change the name. I can also change its scope. So is this only specific to this topic, to this conversation, or it could be used broadly? So for example, in our welcome topic or a greeting topic, I might want to capture information then, and then I can make it available to all of these other topics that are in use. The other thing is you can host these chat canvases outside of Teams, outside of, on other properties like websites. And so you can also pass in these values here by clicking on this external sources can set values itself. Let's see, user responses, variables. Okay, so in the question dialog, yeah, okay, thank you, Mohammed, for you're doing a great job of keeping up there as well. Is there a timeline for getting PVA working in Teams instead of a personal app? So I don't have any specific timelines to share here today. This is public preview. It was very hot release coming into Ignite. So it would be something where I fully expect that is something that'll be addressed in the not so distant future. But it is something where this is iterative. Like, this is by far done. And so that is something that I feel will be introduced in the not so distant future as the team continues to add features and also get this into a general availability stage as well. Okay, so there's a question about licensing. Now, so Jonathan, when we talk about pricing for Power Virtual Agents, it's maybe just easiest to go ahead. Pricing plans. So when you go ahead and you sign up for Power Virtual Agents, and this is Canadian dollars, just for folks calling in elsewhere, this is essentially what you're paying for, right? You're going to pay approximately, that's the retail price for 2,000 sessions. Now, what is a session? A session is essentially a conversation where you are calling into a user topic, and that conversation could be 60 minutes or 100 turns. So a turn is essentially a question and an answer. And so when you buy this specific SKU or this plan, what happens is that allows you to call this chatbot from anywhere, including like an external website. We also give you some additional entitlement. We give you a premium flow plan as part of this. So you get to use those premium connectors. You have higher API throttling limits. And then what you also have is some CDS entitlement. So this is what you pay for. Now, when we talk about Teams and what you showed here, as part of your Teams license, your Teams entitlement, you can go build those chatbots without paying any additional money, right? So you don't have to add any licenses. However, there are some limitations. So for example, you can't use premium connectors. So in the scenarios I showed you in Teams, those were all based upon Office 365 connectors. Those are sort of in the box and you're free to use them. You wouldn't be able to use, say, ServiceNow though, without going ahead and basically buying a consumption-based plan. And so hopefully that helps clarify things from that perspective. I'm going to have to move forward just in the interest of